All right, welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, to the Benny and Jacob show. Today, back with a Conquest. We're doing some wiring. We have a new distributor in from Motocam360. It's an optical distributor. They call them Dizzies, but we got to wire that in with our cam signal. We also got in a bracket here for the crank signal. We've got our crank pulley installed down here. It's also from Motocam360. They sell these anodized aluminum cranks with the teeth on them and everything. So you can just drop it in and be set to go to throw a sensor on it and have sequential fueling, ignition, both, one or the other, whichever you end up deciding on. And then otherwise we've moved these two relays for the fans from the fender over here. They're mounted upside down, which isn't a huge deal, but if there's water under the hood, they can get in the back of the connectors, cause you issues. So we've went ahead and got those mounted. We pushed some of the relays kind of out of the way for the factory harness. And otherwise, we've just kind of been tidying up. We've cleaned up some of the grounds, moved some of our connectors, like our fan triggers here now, zip tied together a little bit. We're just kind of cleaning house. We pulled out the cruise control module. I was looking at removing the brake, like the ABS module, which is this large piece. Kind of crazy to think that pre-90s had ABS on it, but I was looking at removing that. I don't know exactly what's required yet, so I need to do some research. And then otherwise, we're just gonna kind of keep wiring stuff in, see if I can get the cam signal all figured out, get coolant temp, TPS, whatever, all wired in, because I've got all of my wire ends, and then I've got a bunch of pigtails, so I can go through and get things like my injectors wired in, and hopefully be dialed in, ready to go here soon. The one thing I did forget was my gasket material to make a new gasket for this. Found out that it does use a Ford 4.6 throttle body though on here, so that's what this bolt pattern is. I can just get a gasket for that, or I can make my own. We should be good to go. But I'm gonna get some more wiring done. I'll bring you guys back when we're done. All right, we have made some changes. Just realized I don't have my light, so we'll start on the outside for the changes we've made. We've got some of the wiring done, and a lot of it has just been routed at this point. I need to work on holding this farther away. Under here, we have IAT in here. We've got the coolant temp over here. TPS, I need to find the pinout for the throttle body that I'm using, get that sorted. I need to get my cam sensor sorted still, injector connectors, and then my coil pack connectors, because I've got all of those just laying here, and then also my engine ground. What I'm going to do is I'm going to group my grounds for the coils with the engine ground, get those grounded nicely to the block, make sure it's grounded nicely to the chassis. We got the crank sensor mounted down here, and otherwise that's about all we've done in the engine bay, other than we ran our painless performance power wire all the way down and around. I'm going to run that straight off the alternator just to ensure everything has good constant power whenever it's running. And that does have a lead that runs straight to the battery, so it should be fine. It'll be a little neater than trying to run it through here. All of the harness wiring comes through over here in the fender. There's a little opening in there where the stock ECU wiring came from, so that's where we just kind of kept with the routing so far. And then on the inside, you'll notice it looks a lot better in here. I took all the wires, pulled them out in their leads, zip tied all the connectors together, and then for now, just to keep it out of the way, I've got it kind of stuffed up in the dash. I need to see what all that I need, what all of it can go, and then I'll look at tidying it up and putting it in there better. Just for now, it's off the floor, it's a little bit less to look at, makes it a little easier to work in here. And then in the corner, you can see we have our painless kit kind of hanging out right here. I'm probably going to take that and mount it up where the fuse panel used to be. I'm assuming that's what went in here. And then the connectors there for the ECU. So I need to figure out like a little mounting system for those. I might take the ECU home and see if I can print up a bracket that'll utilize these two mounting points on it. But for now, they can kind of hang out. we've got our parts box. I used a Duralast coolant temp sensor because lifetime warranty. And then we got these pigtails that I'll be using for the coils. And I was really happy with these because they come with like 4 feet of wire, so I should have plenty to get those wired in nicely. And then from there, I just have to, like I said, run power to the ECU. I need to get a relay set up. I'm going to use a relay and then an inline fuse to feed the coils power because I need 30 amp power. And then from there, to get the dash working, the fuel gauge and the battery gauge, well, the battery gauge for sure should work based off the factory stuff. The fuel gauge would work if I had a factory fuel tank. Unfortunately, it's got a fuel cell on it. So we'll see if I can swap that out eventually. Speedo is going to be cable driven. Tachometer, there's a output on this 4-pin connector here that is for the tach, so I just got to dig the wiring out of behind the dash to run that. Oil pressure and coolant temp though, I have new sensors from MKS Motorsports. Got a new oil pressure switch, and then I've got a coolant temp switch right here that I will be able to hook up, and I should have functional stock gauges for those two, which will be nice for monitoring like the engine health, making sure nothing's going wrong. Just something to keep an eye on, a little bit nice to have. And from there, I think we're making some good progress. So I'll be looking to find another free day here soon to come down, try and get those coils wired in, get the injectors wired in. I'll bring you guys back for that. And I think that should be about it. I need to run, I do need a 12-volt switch to run the fuel pump. There is a relay in the engine bay for it, but the signal wire for it's cut. So I've got this one here, which is labeled as 12-volt switched. It's from the old Holley system that was in here, but I think it should still be 12-volt switched. And if it is, I can just extend this and run it out to the engine bay and use it to trip the fuel pump relay. And from there I should be all right, because it's got its own starter relay that was added on extra. It's got its own fuel pump relay, at which point we should be in pretty good standing. We'll see how it goes, but I'll have to bring you guys back whenever that comes around. What's going on, you filthy animals? Welcome back to the Benny and Jacob show. Today we are working on Conquest again. We are going to try and button up the wiring a bit more. I've got to get the cam sensor wired in, TPS, all of my injector connectors. I have those with me today. We're gonna get those knocked out, knock out the coil pack pigtails, get those wired in, and we're gonna try and get everything grounded nicely too, and then leave our power lead for the coil packs running over here. I want to run a relay similar to how I've got my relays for the fans and everything set up, where they're all tied in, and then in this feed line they have an inline fuse between the relay and the battery, and I want to do similarly for the relay for my coils, because if you ever have a relay go bad or anything, it starts pulling extra amperage, this will pop it rather than letting it continue to draw and be a potential fire hazard or kill your battery. So just for safety, we're gonna go ahead and knock that out, and then I will also get my fuse board inside that I'm going to use to power the ECU and send the signal for that relay wired in a little bit more. You can see the pink wire just kind of hanging back here for right now. I don't have that dialed in yet, but we're going to get it there. And it's kind of the game plan for today, just button up some more of our pigtails, get things better situated. I need to get a gasket for the throttle body still, but I should be able to get that sorted. And then I need some vacuum line to give my fuel pressure regulator a boost reference, because anybody who's new to the boosted car world, when you have fuel pressure, obviously like if you have 50 pounds and your car is naturally aspirated, it doesn't have any sort of back pressure in the intake to push on the injectors, which is fine. So if you have it set to 50 pounds, it's going to stay at 50 pounds. Whenever you have a boosted application, like this one being that it's got a turbo, the manifold is going to be under pressure. So whenever you have 15 pounds of air pressure inside of here, that is 15 pounds pushing back on your fuel injectors. So you have a boost reference fuel pressure regulator, and the 15 pounds of boost that you make will help increase your fuel pressure by about 15 pounds. Typically it's a direct ratio. And then you maintain that 50 PSI even when you're under boost, so that your fuel injectors behave more linearly rather than having a weird curve and drop off to them because the pressure's changed inside the manifold. Things like my Firebird has a stock fuel rail on it, and the fuel pressure regulator has a boost reference that you run from the lower intake manifold, and that helps in that situation. This being that we've got aftermarket turbo, intercooler, aftermarket intake, we need to kind of get a little bit fancy with it. So we've got a Red Horse Performance fuel pressure regulator, which has a boost reference on it. So once we're at the point of getting everything dialed in, we'll get it started. We'll use this gauge to set our fuel pressure with it running, and then we should be good to go from there to make a few pulls. Eventually, we got to get it running and make sure it's reliable first. Do the basics, make sure the brakes work, that kind of thing, because it's important, and as fun as it is to go fast, you need to make sure you can stop safely. So we'll dive inside now, and I'm just going to give you guys a rough layout of kind of where the ECU and everything is mounted currently, and then we'll go from there. All right, now that we're inside, we've got a few things to kind of address. Factory gauge cluster, as you can tell, is right here in my hands rather than being installed. There is a purple tack wire on here somewhere that I'm going to be using for my tachometer, and the Motocam ECU here has a pin out for one of the connectors to just be able to run the signal directly to the gauge cluster. The only issue is I don't know exactly which purple wire they're referencing. We have one over here that looks like it's grounded to the back. I don't know if that's the purple wire because it's very purple, or if it's a couple of different options in here, because there are a couple in here that look like they might have been purple at one point in time, and being that it's been 25 years, 35 years since this car was made, I don't trust that these colors are very accurate anymore. I would expect them to have some fade and some coloration changes to them after that long, especially being that the car sat in the sun for a little while. So we'll go ahead and just set this up here out of the way. We'll worry about addressing a couple other things with the car. Now, in the last series of clips from the last time I was working on this, it wasn't the other day, I cleaned up the wiring in here a decent bit off the floorboard, got it all out the way, and just made it look a little bit better. So that is almost entirely just for visual effect in here. It didn't do anything functional, it just got everything out of the way. Today, like I mentioned, we're going to be getting our ground sorted. Don't need solder yet. We've got a couple sensors. These came from MKS Motorsports. We got an oil pressure sender and then a temperature sender, so that I can wire these into the factory gauges as well and have those work. Provided I get those wired in, it should work just fine. The stock fuel level will not work because I have a fuel cell unless it's got a level sender in it, which I don't think it does. And then the voltage I'll have to figure out, because I don't know if that's ran directly to the alternator or if it's just ran off of the power wires that run through here. I'll have to figure that out probably once we get the car started. Otherwise, like I said, I've got things like my TPS pigtail, I've got my 4 coil pigtails to go over. We already got our coolant temp sensor installed, and things like when you install a fuse board, I'm using that term kind of loosely, I got a Painless Performance fuse kit. It has 3 fuses, has a relay built into it, and it comes with a breaker. Make sure you put this in. Don't just skip this step. They send it to you for a reason, so don't just be like, I don't need that. Make sure you install these. You want to make sure you do things safely, especially if it's going to be something that you want to race and beat on, which the intention for this is to race it, get down with it, have some fun. We want to make sure we do so safely and we don't have an issue where we're out on the track or anything and a wire decides to melt, short out, and possibly set stuff on fire, or anything just fails and starts overdrawing amperage, gets hot. So make sure you install your circuit breakers, do things safely. And I think that's about it to go from there. Got a lot of loose odds and ends and pieces in here I got to sort out still. But down here in the passenger footwell, we'll get some light going. You can see we've got our 2 big connectors for the ECU, and then the little fuse panel I was mentioning to you guys right here. We will be ideally mounting all of this in front of that opening there. I'm not 100% certain as to how I plan to mount it as of yet. There's not a ton of space to do things in here. I've got my HVAC in here still. I don't know if I'm deleting that or keeping it for now. So I'm just wanting to put these somewhere accessible where I can troubleshoot, diagnose, make sure everything's working as it should be before I go through and possibly encounter problems, and I've already got it tucked away where it's difficult to get to. So the other thing I will mention for you guys to try and save you some time and some headache. If you are building something and you're going through and doing wiring modifications, whether it's a fresh harness or like with my Firebird where you have to modify the existing harness, make sure it's accessible before you close everything up. I left mine for the longest time. I didn't have it electrical taped, I didn't have it wire loomed, I left it just completely barren so that I could get to everything, so that if I had an issue, it was accessible and I wasn't sitting here chasing stuff or thinking that because it was sealed up it was done. I knew that I could check my continuity on things like the map signal and make sure they were all good to go before I was like moving on to a mechanical part diagnostic. I would check my electrical first and go from there. I'm going to try and do the same here because I don't want to run into a problem where I've got no spark or it's got a misfire and one of the cylinders just won't fire. I swap the coils around and there's no change, and I'm sitting here trying to diagnose and I'm not thinking to check my wiring. These are very important things to check, especially when you're doing a big project like this. It's very easy to have like one little break or an issue like that somewhere in your wiring. So without further ado, I think we are going to move on out towards the engine bay and see what kind of trouble we can get into as far as getting some wiring done. We'll bring you guys along. Welcome back. I've gotten a little bit done since I last had the camera up. I got some more wiring routed through the fender over there. The coil pack relay signal wires through. I had to take the wideband connector off because one of the wires pulled out of it and I don't have any tool small enough to depin it here. So I kind of gave the others a gentle pull and a lot of them just started pulling loose. So that's not a great start. We're going to see what we can sort out with that. We're gonna take that home to work on it. But for right now, while we're here, we're going to take our injector pigtails. We'll pop these little ends off like that. And we've got some bare wire. And then it was labeled on the harness, had an injector sticker on it. We've got injector 1, well, probably from the back it'd be 4, 3, 2, 1. 1 will be the front cylinder. We're just gonna get these pigtails put on here, leave them pretty long on the length so that I've got room to get them all buttoned in, not have any issues out of them. Should be in a pretty good standing once I get all that sorted. And then I will go ahead and probably do the same with the coil wiring, which is over here. Get the wires for these at least ran for the signal and the ground, and then probably just try and trail everything off so it's just grouped for the power, grouped for the ground, that kind of thing. I'll ground the coils with the engine ground, put a nice big piece on there so they've got a nice steady ground. I don't have any issues there, but I figure we can bring you along while we go ahead and prep these coil connectors. So like I said, we're gonna go over how we just kind of do this real quick and easy. We've got a red and a white wire here, so I feel like it's pretty obvious that the red wire is going to be our power wire. The white would be considered our ground, or our black wire, which will be our signal for these. As you can see, we've got the red and the black. It shouldn't be anything too crazy. These are just really cheap injector pigtails. It's very possible that I will end up trading these out in the future, but I had these on hand, so we'll go ahead and use them for now. We are going to be soldering and heat shrinking these rather than using any sort of butt connector, because we want something that's going to last. We don't want to have an issue where a butt connector comes loose and gives us a problem. So we've got sorted heat shrink. We'll just set this somewhere accessible. We've got a soldering iron, and something like wiring is going to be a regular thing for you to do. Like, some of my hobbies include things like remote control stuff and just computers and electronics in general. Having a nice soldering iron is something that I really didn't expect to make that much of a difference. But when I tell you, it is night and day when you got something that is a soldering station, like this UA 939D Plus. I got this off Amazon. I think it was like 40 bucks. It's got its own, it comes with a full set of tips. It's got a little stand for it rather than just being an all-in-one. So much better. When I plug this in, I don't gotta wait 10 minutes for it to heat up. It feels like it's literally, I turn it on, you can watch the temperature just skyrocket, and you're ready to go in no time. At this point, I need to grab an extension cable, and I'll be right back. I'll have to cut that out. As you can see, it doesn't update the best on the camera, but the temperature on this is just absolutely skyrocketing. That's why these are just a wonderful thing to have. Whenever you're done with it, you just click a button, it turns right off, and you let it cool down. They also come with a little tip cleaning station that you can just dip the tip in, get all the crap off of it. It's got a little bit of flux in the bottom, so it just cleans right up. Gives you a nice starting point every time. Can't complain. I'm picking right now some heat shrink. That should be the appropriate size. Obviously you don't want a heat shrink that's too big, too small, because if it's too big it doesn't fit nicely. Something like this should be alright. It fits over our wiring with some room, but it should shrink down and fit nicely. So what we'll go ahead and do is we're going to cut about a 1/2 inch piece off. And we'll need 2 of them, one for the positive, one for the ground. And then make sure that you don't forget to put these on here. I've soldered things before, forgotten to put the heat shrink on, and you have to either cut it or undo the solder, put the heat shrink on, and redo it. And all you're doing is wasting your own time. The other thing, they do have wire stripping tools. Those are technically the right thing to use here. However, if you're careful, you can strip it with your cutters. You just have to be careful so as not to damage anything. You don't want to break off a few strands of wire or anything, so just enough pressure it doesn't slip, and it pops, just like that. What we'll do from here, I would really like for this ground wire to have some better access. So we're going to pinch it and try and pull some of it out of the loom here, just so we've got a little bit more to work with. We're going to take these, just try and gently twist them around each other a little bit, just to kind of hold closer to each other. It's not always the easiest. I'm going to cut a little more of this one for you. Cut just a little bit more of the pigtail side free. Like I said, we're just going to try and get these twisted up a little bit so they hold on to each other. And then grab some soldering flux. I just dip my solder in it, so there's just a thin coating on there. Apply some heat. Start melting. You don't want to breathe this stuff in. It is not good for you. So make sure you're in a ventilated area. We've got the air flowing in the building today. And just like that, we have one of our 2 joints done. It's quick. It was easy. Do the same for this side. Kind of pull it. Get them nice and close. Try and wrap them around each other as best we can. Just so that it tries to hold that wire in place, rather than trying to use your fingers or anything where you can burn yourself. You just kind of wrap it all up. Clean the tip of the soldering iron, and then just apply it just enough to fill in the wires. Don't need to go crazy. It doesn't make a big difference. Like, the wires can only move so much, so if you have the wires thoroughly coated like this, inside and out, they're going to move everything they can. If you go crazy overkill and put a whole bunch of solder on there, you're not actually helping anything. you're just making yourself a bigger piece to try and slide your heat shrink over. Now this one, got one little wire it looks like sticking up off the side. Might be hard for you guys to see. We're just gonna go in here and clean it up a little bit. And we'll slide that on over. Do the same for this side. And grab a heat gun. We'll just hit it real quick. And just like that, you have a nicely finished solder connection. You can pull your jacketing up. Sometimes, depending on how loose the tape is, it'll just slide over. You can just take this, round it down, and click it on. Boom. Got an injector connected. So the next thing will be to just go ahead and do the next 3. I might set you guys here and do a quick time lapse of that, and bring you back when we're done. Alright, well, as you guys saw, I just went ahead and knocked out these last 3 connectors. We got them heat shrunk, kind of dialed in, ready to go. So they're good to just right under here, clip into place on each and every one of these. And again, I left these pretty long, and the reason for that is I would rather have them a bit long and have room to move them around, make adjustments, trim them in the future, etc. Especially if I do something like swap engines. This motor should be just fine for everything we're going to do with it. It has a little bit of almost detonation look on the surface of piston 1, but it's hard to tell. The bore scope, it looks very flat, and usually with detonation it's got some indentation to it. But from everything I've been told, this ECU supports running different style motors. So if I were to swap to a dual overhead cam setup in the future, whether it's from Mitsubishi or whatever manufacturer, supposedly this ECU should be able to handle the swap, provided I get the right sensors, etc. Should be just fine. So we're leaving everything just kind of a little bit long, so if there's ever any changes in the future or whatever, we can work with it. And just because it makes it a little easier to kind of route everything, group it together, and keep it out the way. Next step, gonna get the coils done. I'm also going to time lapse those. I have the coils right here. I have no idea if these are a good brand or not. I'm not seeing anything bad about them online. I got them in a package deal where I got these. Welcome back. We've done some work here. Like I said I was gonna do, I went ahead and I grouped all of my different leads here. We've got everything kind of tidied up, and I did it like I said I was going to, where I did the cylinder head ground, the battery ground, and the battery lead, and they're all grouped together as the positives. And here I have them bulkheaded. I will end up going through, after I get these, the trigger and the sensor return into this little loop, what I'll end up doing is I will go along and tape over, tape up to the connector, tape over, tape up to the connector, and then so on and so forth all the way through these. I'll actually probably start at the connector, come down to the harness, and then tape over it so that it's tucked away. If you start here and then lead up to this, when you end, you're gonna have an exposed end. You can kind of, it's gonna be hard for you guys to see, but here the end is not taped over, it's exposed. If you start on this end and then tape it down here, you can kind of tape over as you wrap all of this, and it'll help it stay together better and just keep it from coming undone in the future. At which point I think the next step will be TPS and the cam sensor, as far as I can get those wired in. I know that I need to have some power to those in a couple instances to know which way they move and whatnot. Like the TPS, I don't exactly know which one's the 5 volt, the ground, and the ref. I need to find that. If I can Google it and find a pinout, that'll make life way easier. If not, I'll need to bench test it, find a way to get 5 volt and ground and see which one reference. And then same with the cam. The cam sensor has a ground, 5 volt, and a ref. I need to sort out all 3 of those and get it dialed in. And I don't recall if the supplied cam sensor has a spot for that to deliver 5 volt or if it just has a ground and then the sensor output, and if I need to deliver 5 volts separately. I'll have to look. But bring you back once I get some more done with these coil packs, and hopefully it'll be a lot prettier looking. Obviously there won't be loom on it, it's just going to be wrapped in electrical tape unless I run out. We are getting a little shy on supply, but we'll see what we can get done. I am a little bit nervous.
There's a monster,
all right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We are at the Conquest again today, and we've finished up wiring. I've ran my vacuum tees. We've got our map reference for the interior. We've got vacuum reference to the fuel pressure regulator. Obviously no spark plug boots on as of yet, but what we're gonna try is we're gonna just throw some power at the positive negative lead, make sure all of the wiring that's in here so far is happy and not going to spark or short or anything it shouldn't, but it's just easier to double check without a full battery in here, where you can just come over and pop this off real easy and take the source of power away before anything happens, compared to having a battery in here where you, if it sparks around the battery, you're trying to chase and get that off. So I guess we're ready to click start. We're again just using a jump box, nothing crazy. We've got power to it, and then if we come to the interior, are any of the door lights on? A very faint door light here, so it is getting power.
I'm hearing some. Is that the fuel pump? Or is that fuel on?
I hear
What is that?
leaves moving.
Yes. Is that your wipers?
So this is key off.
What was that? I heard something.
Is there fuel pressure?
Sounds like it. Oh wait, I don't really want to lean over.
I'll lean over, it's fine.
Because I don't want one of those things to fuck.
We do have fuel pressure. No fuel pressure. And it sounds like a blower motor's running, so we're gonna poke around a little bit, see if we can get some stuff to turn off.
Yeah, your blower mower.
And we'll come back. It didn't take a lot of poking around. I had the wipers on because this switch just clicks down and it turns on the wipers. Did we just lose power?
Yeah, we did.
Womp womp. I think we're gonna throw a battery in it, and then I've got my 12 volt reference. You wanna turn it back on?
Yeah.
Yeah, just go ahead and click start. Okay, we've got power back. We're gonna turn power on. We're gonna touch these and see if we get a fuel pump. Or it just turns off all the power.
I don't think it likes that.
Probably not. We're gonna throw a battery in it and we will be back.
Okay.
All right, welcome back. We put a battery in the car. We went and grabbed the battery out of Garrett's Camaro that you guys have seen do some donuts. And we've got it just kind of sitting in here. It's not positioned the greatest because it looks like they've got this set up almost for a motorcycle battery. So we just kind of have that setting over in place. We've got the door lights on, and we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna go key on. We got key on, and then we're gonna take and connect our ignition wire here.
Is the negative terminal plugged in? Is it loose?
And we've got a fuel pump going.
Hey, off, spray.
We're leaking.
Yep.
And we've got fuel leaks. So we've got more things to go fix. And where was it leaking fuel?
It looked like cylinder 2 came from the middle of
Like from the injector?
the rail. Yeah, it was from the O-ring, so it's nothing serious.
No.
You can tell it's from the O-ring.
Yeah. We've got fuel kind of sprayed everywhere.
Here's cylinder 2. You can see that one's pretty wet.
Well, it looks like the front cylinder and even this one. So
Just a little bit of seating to do.
how bad was it spraying?
Very minor at first,
And then it ramped up when it
but it
built
wasn't
pressure?
bad. Like I've seen
Okay.
worse by far. So
Well, I'm just wondering because I've got the other injectors for it that felt like they sealed better.
yeah.
I was debating how much we should try and cycle the fuel system. Because these are the injectors that we'll be running. They're Siemens Deca 80 pounds, I believe.
But dude, pump works. Everything
Pump
fine.
works.
That's good news.
Did you see if it built pressure when you
It
looked?
did build pressure as about 10 pounds before it squirted.
Okay. So I guess we can look at swapping those injectors because they're not going to be firing, so we shouldn't have to worry about any sort of dirt getting on there. That was my main concern.
Those are the old ones, correct?
Yeah, these are the old ones. These are
Seals are blown, so.
the injectors I got with my original top swap for the
The rear
Firebird.
did
So
not leak at all.
we'll go ahead and pull these, we'll get them swapped, and we'll try again.
Finisher and a jiffy.
That's fair.
So
We got the fuel leak sorted. We lubricated and put the new injectors in. They fit a lot better than the old ones. So we're gonna turn it over and just see what it sounds like. I need to turn up the fuel pressure. It's only making like 15 to 20 pounds right now, and it needs 45 to 50 before we're good to fire. And then I need to also sort out the cam sensor before I can try anything, because it's not gonna try to fire without the cam sensor hooked up. But, well, we've got everything hooked up and we're doing some preliminary testing. We might as well see what happens when we bump the clutch. Not the bump the clutch, bump the starter. You ready? I'd say that sounds pretty healthy. Would you agree?
yeah, go again. Listen to that.
I don't hear any low spots or like it's galloping.
No. And everything was cranked. Everything cranked with no resistance.
Do we want to put it in gear and make sure the clutch is functioning?
If you want to.
Yeah.
Oh!
Clutch is good, so
Do you want to watch it spin? Watch it turn over up front?
now I think what I need to do
Spin
is
smooth.
we need to hook up this power here.
Okay.
Probably take away the power for that fuel pump just so it's not running all the time, so I can have this hooked up and I can test for the 5-volt off the distributor. Put some spark plug wires on it. See if
That
it
wire
lights
is
off.
so you can wire a switch, correct? For the pump?
This
Those
here?
two? Yeah, you're going to wire a switch.
This
for
is
it.
based off ignition on. So if I turn the ignition to the lock position right here, I guess I probably should have shown you guys this. We got the key here. When it's in the on position, and I take these two wires and I touch them together, you guys can't even see, we get fuel pressure. But if I turn this to the lock position, we have nothing when I touch these. So that is set up. I don't plan to take this car anywhere and have it just sitting with like the key on and the car not running. So I've got it set up so that if I do go anywhere, it's just going to be key on, fuel pump on. I can try and find the regular fuel pump connector somewhere in here, wherever it is, and hook it up that way so that it only primes and everything like that based off of time and everything. But that's just a couple extra steps that I don't want to go through right now because I don't plan to do that with this car. It has no radio. It's missing the speakers in the dash. I don't plan to make it like a nice daily. It's just going to be something that I try to take and go racing with. So not super worried about that. Like I said though, I think the current game plan is going to be try and get that 5-volt sorted on the cam sensor. I'll see if I can Google it. If I can Google it, that'll make things easier. If not, I'll have to try and test it and find out which one it is and then wire it in, hook up the injectors and the coils and see if it starts. I don't have my laptop with me, so I can't make any tune adjustments to get it to start, but Tim over at Motocam360, if you send him your build specs, when you get the ECU, it comes preloaded with a tune that should get it to start and run a little bit. So let's see if I can get that sorted, and then might be able to get the thing started. It is about mid-October right now, and we brought this, when did we bring this here? Mid-February?
It was February, late February.
Late February? So not quite 8 months,
Yeah.
which is crazy to think about. Garrett's been gracious. He's taken care of this and like stored it for me. So whenever I've had time and we've had time, I've been over here working on it. But in 8 months, we've gotten the wiring sorted and we're hoping to have it running. And I will bring you guys back here in a little bit. Ladies and gentlemen, I regret to inform you, we're running tonight on a bit of an unknown. So we got the fuel system priming and it does build some fuel pressure. I don't know if it's not thrilled about how the fuel pump's set up, if it needs to be running to maintain it or not, but we do have it building up to about 40-45 psi, and then after it continually runs, it slowly bleeds down. I'm wondering if there's a voltage draw issue because it's hooked to the back of the alternator rather than straight to the battery. Not sure, we'll find out later. On a good note, the engine sounds healthy when it's cranking. I've got a quick clip of it and I'm pretty happy with it. There's no low compression as far as I can tell, and the only thing that's got to slow down tonight is the distributor. On these, it's an optical distributor. They use it for the cam signal, which I need, being that it has sequential fueling and ignition. It needs the cam signal. And I've got a multimeter here. I didn't record it because we spent some time fighting with it, but I've got a multimeter, and you just set it to 12 volt, and then probe the ground wire and the reference wires, and one of them is going to be a 0 to 5 volt, one will be 0 to 12. And I grounded it, gave it 12 volt, and turned it over, and I didn't get anything. There was no readout or anything from it. And so I started talking with Tim, and he had me double check my grounds, did all that, and I still wasn't getting a reading, which is unusual. So I'm waiting on him. He's going to take one that he has, he said, and test it and give me some information based off of what he tests with. I even disconnected the distributor, fully pulled it out, and ran the 12 volt in the ground directly to the battery, and I wasn't getting anything. So it might just be that it's a bad unit, and we'll see how it goes from there. But as of right now, that's a current hold up. So unfortunately, it doesn't get to stay out of the corner. We'll take it, we'll push it back, and then when I get some answers, possibly new parts if we need them, I'll be back to you guys, and hopefully we'll hear it make some noise. But until next time, stay safe, show me your taillights.